inside any brain, there is a certain pattern of connections that keeps showing up everywhere. Whether you look at individual neurons in a petri dish, or connectivity between major brain areas in humans, there is something universal in all of them. And you know what's even more intriguing? When sociologists analyze friendship networks, or when molecular biologists look at how genes regulate each other, they all find the exact same pattern. It's as if nature keeps converging on this particular way of organizing complex networks. Today, we're taking a closer look at this mysterious pattern of organization called small world graphs. We'll discuss what they are, why they appear everywhere you look, and how they give your brain such remarkable information processing capabilities. Before we begin, let's establish some terminology. At their core, networks are collections of elements, called nodes, connected by links, called edges. Together, nodes and edges form a graph, an abstract representation of the network structure. This abstraction is powerful precisely because nodes and edges can represent many different physical systems. In the brain, for instance, nodes might be individual neurons, with edges representing synaptic connections between them. Or we might zoom out, treating entire brain regions as nodes, with edges corresponding to white matter tracts connecting them. The beauty is that these fundamentally different systems can be analyzed using the same mathematical framework once we abstract them as graphs. Even more, connections in the graph don't have to be physical at all. Beyond anatomical connectivity, that is, the physical wiring of neurons or brain regions, we can study functional connectivity, which captures how different parts of the system work together. Two neurons might be considered functionally connected if they tend to generate electrical impulses in synchrony. Or two brain regions might show coordinated activity during a specific task. While functional connections often have a lot in common with the underlying anatomical paths, they reveal a different layer of organization, showing us not just how the brain is wired, but how that wiring gives rise to coordinated activity. Everything we'll cover in this video was demonstrated both within various anatomical and functional networks, revealing universal principles of network organization at all scales and modalities. Now that we have these basic concepts at hand, let's explore what makes certain graph architectures particularly special. Imagine you're designing a system, like a city, a computer network, or a brain, that needs to perform two competing functions. On one hand, you need tight-knit, local groups where elements work closely together. In a city, these are neighborhoods where people frequently interact. In the brain, these are local circuits processing specific information, like recognizing edges in an image or controlling hand movements. On the other hand, you also need efficient global communication. Sometimes information needs to quickly travel between distant parts of the system, like a delivery from one side of the city to another, or a signal from neurons in a visual area to motor pathways. Now, is there any way you can achieve both? Well, the simplest solution would be to connect everything to everything else. But that is incredibly costly and, in the physical world, often impossible. Too many roads, too many cables, or, in the brain's case, too many long-range connections taking up space. Volume inside the skull is finite, so there is only so many pathways the brain can afford. While it might look like these two objectives are in direct competition with each other, it turns out there is an optimal solution that efficiently combines the best of both worlds: local specialization and global integration. And to understand it, we need to look at the two fundamental properties of graphs. The efficiency of global communication in a network can be quantified by its average path length. If you randomly select any pair of nodes, what is the minimum number of edges you need to traverse to get from one to another? This measure tells us how well connected the network is globally, how efficiently information can flow between any two points. A low average path length indicates that any part of the network can quickly communicate with any other part. Local interaction density can be formalized through what's known as the clustering coefficient. Let's take any node X and consider its immediate neighbors, the nodes it connects to directly. For these neighbors, we examine how interconnected they are with each other. In networks with high clustering, we expect these neighbors to share many connections among themselves. Think of human social interactions. If you have two friends, chances are they're also friends with each other through things like work or school. To quantify this mathematically, we can compute the ratio of actual connections between all the neighbors of X and the total number of possible connections between them. For example, if the node has 3 neighbors, there are 3 possible edges that could exist between those neighbors. If all of these possible connections are present, the clustering coefficient for this node X is 1, the maximum possible value. If only one of these potential connections exists, the clustering would be 1/3. To characterize the network as a whole, we can calculate the clustering coefficient for each node and take their average, which tells us how prevalent tight-knit groups are throughout the system. With those two quantities at hand, let's see how different network architectures balance them. First, consider a regular lattice, like the arrangement of atoms in a crystal, where each node connects only to its nearest neighbors. In such networks, clustering is naturally high. Your neighbors tend to be neighbors with each other. However, to get from one side of the network to another, you need to traverse many steps, making global communication highly inefficient with large path lengths. At the other extreme, imagine connecting nodes completely randomly. Even with just a small fraction of possible edges, such networks achieve remarkably short path lengths, allowing you to reach any point in just a few hops. However, they lack meaningful local structure. For networks with a limited number of connections, clustering coefficient is very low, because your neighbors are no more likely to connect to each other than to any other random node. But is there some kind of sweet spot between those two extremes? This very question led to a breakthrough in network science. It turns out you can dramatically reduce path length while maintaining most of the clustering by rewiring just a small fraction of connections in a regular lattice. This random process of rewiring certain local connections is known as the Watts-Strogatz model. Adding just a few shortcuts, long-range connections that bridge distant parts of the network is enough to make the graph globally efficient while preserving its local structure. Networks that achieve this balance, high clustering almost like a regular lattice, but short path lengths like a random graph, are called small-world networks, alluding to the phenomenon when you meet a stranger with surprising mutual connections and exclaim, "What a small world!" Speaking of unexpected connections, they appear not just between people, but also between ideas in knowledge networks. These conceptual small worlds are exactly what our today's sponsor, Shortform, helps you discover. Shortform takes your reading to the next level by offering book guides, condensed summaries of main points from nonfiction books, enhanced by weaving in related ideas and contrasting perspectives from other books and research papers. This is really helpful when choosing books to read, and it helps you retain information better by placing it in a broader context. For example, when I read 1,000 Brains by Jeff Hawkins, Shortform's brilliant summary helped me discover notable connections to other topics in neuroscience and psychology that I missed on my own. Shortform's extensive library covers a huge variety of topics, like science, technology, and biographies, with new books being published every week. If you want to supercharge your reading experience, claim your 5-day free trial and a 20% discount on annual membership by joining Shortform through my special link, shortform.com/Artem, or click the link down in the video description. Now, I'd like to clarify something important. Often people use small-world and Watts-Strogatz graphs almost interchangeably. However, this is not quite accurate. Small-worldness is a general property of having simultaneously high clustering coefficient and short path lengths, while the Watts-Strogatz model is a specific simple method for creating random graphs with such small-world properties. But not all small-world networks, including the brain, can be described using this simple model. It's hard to imagine that neurons in the brain start off as a regular lattice that is randomly rewired. Indeed, there are certain other properties of brain networks beyond being just small world that are not captured by this model. And perhaps the most important of them is the existence of hubs. When we look at real brain networks, we find something striking. Not all nodes are created equal. Some neurons or brain regions have many more connections than others. If we plot the distribution of how many connections different nodes have, known as their degree, we don't see the bell-shaped curve you'd expect from a simple Watts-Strogatz model, where all nodes have similar connection patterns. Instead, we find what's known as a heavy-tailed distribution, often close to log-normal or power law curves. This means that there is a small but significant number of highly connected nodes that play a special role, acting as kind of hubs in the network. These hubs serve as bridges between different processing modules, enabling efficient global communication while preserving specialized local processing. We see this principle at work across many different scales. In C. elegans worms, where scientists have mapped every single neuron and every connection, there indeed exist certain hub cells, responsible for relaying a bulk of communication within the network. In the human brain, we find specific regions that send connections throughout much of the brain. One such hub is the locus ceruleus, a nucleus in the brainstem that acts as the brain's primary source of noradrenaline, modulating arousal and attention across diverse brain regions. This architectural principle, combining small-world networks, namely short paths and high clustering, with specialized hub nodes, appears consistently across multiple scales in the brain. Its repeated emergence suggests that it's a fundamental principle of neural organization. But why did evolution converge on this particular arrangement? We initially arrived at small-world architecture as graphs that solve a fundamental mathematical problem, namely achieving both short path lengths and high clustering coefficients with a reasonable number of connections. Well, it turns out this maps perfectly to the challenges faced by evolving nervous systems. At any given moment, different parts of your brain are processing specific types of information with high degree of parallelism. In your visual cortex, some groups of neurons detect edges, others track motion, while others process color. These specialized groups need to be able to work independently, like parallel computers, each focused on their own task, extracting many different features at once without having to wait for each other. This is where high clustering of small-world networks becomes crucial. It creates modules of neurons that can work together intensively without interference from other groups. And we see this specialized modular processing throughout the brain. Your somatosensory cortex, for example, has distinct patches of neural tissue dedicated to processing touch sensations from different body parts. Motor areas have separate circuits controlling different muscle groups. Each of these modules needs its own space to process information efficiently. But specialized computation alone isn't enough. The brain needs to rapidly combine information from these different modules to create coherent experiences and actions. Imagine catching a ball. Your visual system needs to communicate with motor areas to guide hand movements. You need to integrate information about the ball's speed, trajectory, and position with precise muscle control, all in a fraction of a second. This requires global efficiency, the ability to quickly transmit signals between any two points in the network. This is where the magic of small-world architecture truly shines. These crucial shortcut connections, and especially hub neurons, dramatically reduce the number of steps needed for signals to travel between distant brain regions. Information can traverse millions of neurons in just a few synaptic hops. Of course, this global connectivity comes at a cost, as each long-range connection requires energy to maintain and takes up valuable space inside the skull. The longer the axon wire, the more cellular machinery is needed to transport proteins and maintain the connection. This wiring cost problem is exactly why the brain can't simply connect everything to everything. It needs to achieve maximum computational power with minimum possible wiring. Another fascinating benefit of the small-world connectivity is its robustness to failure. Individual neurons are not particularly reliable. After all, they are biological cells that can die or malfunction. Evolution has pushed our brains to be resilient to such disruptions. The dense connectivity within modules creates redundancy. If one component fails, information can find alternative routes. While random damage to single neurons typically has minimal impact, there are certainly points of vulnerability, those crucial hub nodes. Damage to these highly connected nodes can have widespread effects throughout the network, which may help explain why certain brain disorders can cause such diverse symptoms when key hub regions are affected. Alright, let's tie everything together. In this video, we explored small-world networks, an elegant graph architecture that combines short path lengths with high clustering. This network structure appears throughout nature, from gene networks to social systems. In the brain, we find it at every scale, suggesting that these patterns are fundamental to computation. Indeed, small-world networks solve three crucial challenges for the brain. They enable specialized processing in local circuits, allow rapid integration of information across distant regions, and maintain robustness against failure. It is a brilliant compromise between the competing demands of efficiency and cost, showing us how nature has discovered fundamental principles of network design that are universal in so many domains of life. If you enjoyed the video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and press the like button. Stay tuned for more neuroscience and machine learning topics coming up.